Okay, is this showing up okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, thanks. So, my name is Aryeh Drager, and I use he, him pronouns, and I am excited to share some of my adventures with multiple grading schemes from this past year. So, just to start off, there's going to be part of this recording is going to be shared on the normal YouTube channel. But part of it is not. There's going to be a part at the end that I don't really want my students to stumble upon accidentally or intentionally. So there is going to be this form that I created to request video access for the second part of that recording. So if you are watching this on YouTube right now, you can still go to that link and complete the Google form. And I will be happy to send you the link to part two of the recording once it is posted, if you can demonstrate to me that you're actually like a faculty member, not a student. All right. So motivation. Um, let's see, there is one other thing that I was going to try to get started right now, and that is iClicker. So let's see if the event started okay. So if Uh, people are able to join this. I hope it works. Um, I don't know if there's something that I need to do on my end. I have one participant so far. Um, two. All right, the code is ETNC. I will go ahead and put that in the chat as well. All right. Um, yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on. So, um, in short, what is multiple grading schemes? This is a setup where you have multiple ways of calculating a student's grade. So this diagram, this chart shows four different schemes, which I'm calling A, B, C, and D. I don't actually call them that in my syllabus. I call them Formula One, Formula Two, etc. But when we do multiple choice questions in iClicker later on, it's going to be better to have them as A, B, C, and D. Um, so um, we have these different formulas, and then for every student's grade is going to be calculated based on every single formula. And then the grade that they actually get at the end of the semester is whichever one of these is the highest. So for this hypothetical student that's shown here, if they had a 75% based on scheme C, 79% based on scheme B, and so forth, the 91% is the highest with scheme D. It looks like they probably did really well in the final exam. And this setup rewards them for that. So, why would we do something like this? It kind of goes back, in my mind, to the question of what grades are even supposed to do to begin with. So, are they supposed to reflect the extent to which a student has achieved learning outcomes for the class? Oftentimes, we as instructors also want to try to use them to incentivize activities that we know are going to help promote their learning, or at least for most students, help promote learning. We also, are reporting these grades on transcripts that go to grad schools, future employers, um, and those future employers or grad schools might be looking for evidence of a student's overall level of conscientiousness or willingness to comply with demands, or what is their academic brilliance, whatever that means. Um, and then ultimately, we also, I think, ideally want to provide all learners a chance to succeed, and we want to design our grading systems accordingly. And, there are some philosophical questions about like which of these is most important. Um, I'm not going to answer that today, um, because I think all of us may have different weights for all of these things in our own minds. Um, And then the question arises, like, how do we optimize our grading methods toward achieving one or more or all of these aims. Um, and unfortunately, it can be difficult to do that. So, um, I want you to take a moment just to picture some students here. Picture a student in your classes who has, if you could think of a specific student, that'd be great, who has struggled on the early assignments and exams, but ideally persisted and finished the semester with an excellent command of the course material. That can happen. That does happen. But students who struggle early on, maybe you've had a different student who became discouraged and gave up because it was mathematically impossible for them to earn their desired grade based on their scores on the early assignments and exams. Maybe you had a student who came to you at the start of the semester concerned about their history of test anxiety. And again, there could be kind of two pathways for such a student. Ideally, we'd hope that the student would find a way to succeed, but too often I think they'll end up panicking during their high stakes exams, finish the class with a failing or marginally passing grade. But could we do something instead that would help empower them to learn that they can earn their desired grade by demonstrating their achievement of course learning outcomes in other ways? Um, and I mean, the other ideal situation here was that the student would be able to, of course, manage their issues with test anxiety. Test anxiety. That's a typo there, and kind of learn skills to do better on exams and be less anxious. But I think we've all known students who have kind of had struggles that have persisted over multiple semesters and multiple years that aren't able to overcome those issues super quickly. Um, and then can you picture a student who maybe fell behind partway through the semester due to a personal crisis, and then by the time they got back from that crisis, maybe they got sick, maybe they had a death in the family, maybe when they came back, they fell even further behind. Even though the crisis may have been resolved, they couldn't dig out from the pile of unfinished work. Um, And I think ideally in these scenarios, we want the student to be able to refocus on learning after the crisis is resolved and ultimately be able to succeed. And maybe picture some students who are able to do that. And then the question that arises is how can we support all of these students? And um, my purpose in employing this multiple grading schemes approach is that it at least attempts to provide pathways to success for more students. So I'm going to start off by talking about my experiments this past year in my meteorology classes that I've taught, both an upper division class and a general education lower division class. I'm also going to show you how it's possible to implement this into Brightspace. Um, and then at the very end, I will restart the recording and talk about some of my lessons learned and what I'm thinking about moving into the coming academic year. So in Meteorology 100, this is a general education course. There are no math prerequisites. A lot of our meteorology classes are very computationally and quantitatively rigorous. Met 100 is not. There are no math prerequisites. Um, and I came up with these four schemes. So scheme A weights exams in total only 50% of the grade. And then the other 50% is based on in-class assignments and homework and attendance and participation. These things are for the most part evaluated based on completion rather than based on correctness, although one of the homework assignments was graded for correctness as well. Um, and then we have other schemes that weight the exams more heavily. So in this particular situation, I wasn't comfortable having any schemes that weighted the exams at less than 50%. So that was kind of the floor for how much I was weighting them in any of the schemes. And in general, it's best not to go with any scheme that you aren't comfortable with on its own. Um, so then going into schemes B, C, and D, I ratcheted up the total weight of the exams. In this scheme, they're up to 70%, then 80%. And then in scheme D, we reapportion the weighting of the midterm exams and the final exam so that the comprehensive final exam is 70% of the course grade, such that students could earn a passing grade in the class if they did absolutely nothing all semester, but maybe they were able to teach themselves the material, and were able to succeed on the final exam. And then I went in and crunched the numbers to see how many students ended up with a grade based on this scheme. So for how many students scheme A was most advantageous, scheme B, scheme C, and scheme D. And you'll see that there were no students for scheme B. Um, I even had last night when I was putting this together, I went in and tried to make sure I could convince myself that it was mathematically possible for scheme B to come out ahead, and it is possible. Um, but it just didn't happen with any of the students in this particular class. And this was broken up into two sections, one section of about 28 students, the other with about 22 students, but I just aggregated these across all sections. Um, there were 22 students overall who benefited most from the heavily exam-weighted ones, and of those, most of them benefited the most from Scheme D, which weighted the final exam the heaviest. Um, so now we'll have the iClicker portion. Um, so the first question here is, which of these schemes benefits a student who struggles early on but gets it by the end of the semester? Um, Scheme A, B, C, or D. The answer choices should just be A through E. Um, so hopefully this is straightforward. Um, so if a student is struggling early on but gets it by the end of the semester, and there might not be a unique correct answer for this, but hopefully it's clear what I'm going for at least. Is anyone having trouble with iClicker? All right, so I will go ahead and stop this. I have 3 responses so far. Then in terms of the results, everyone said answer choice D. I guess this is not showing up on my screen, but take my word for it, everyone answered D, and that was correct. That was what I had in mind, at least. Which of these schemes most benefits a student who has extreme test anxiety? Again, that's a typo. Should be test anxiety. And I should press start there. All right, I'm going to assume that we're maxing out at 3 responses for this. And so results were, all right, everyone said A. So yeah, answer choice A, scheme A weights the exams least heavily. And I would also hope that with a student who does have this extreme test anxiety, having that pathway where maybe they don't have to do so well on the exams and they aren't as higher stakes, would maybe alleviate some of that anxiety. All right, and then finally, which scheme most benefits a student who misses class and homework and ultimately is able to be an effective self-teacher? And maybe they do other things to teach themselves the course material rather than the activities that were designed to promote learning. Maybe they found other ways to teach themselves the material. And again, there isn't necessarily a unique correct answer for this one. Um, all right, I have 3 responses, and everyone said C in this case. So this one weights the exams most heavily. I would have said C or D because both of them weight the exams heavily. But yeah, ultimately, if students are wanting to kind of pace themselves through the semester and perform well on all of the exams, that's probably the most sustainable way if you're going to be teaching yourself the material, best to not cram it all at the end of the semester. We also want to have students going back and trying to relearn things and revisit material in order to build long-term memory. But yeah, so everyone said C. I think that's a perfectly reasonable answer. All right, so and then I also wanted to share this about Meteorology 350, meteorological experimentation. This class was only 15 students. This is an upper division class that's required for the meteorology major and also um, something that students can use to complete the meteorology minor. Um, and all of these schemes have 10% for attendance and participation. Um, but they have different weights for homework, the midterm exams, the final paper, and the final presentation. And ultimately, there was at least one student who benefited from each of these schemes. But again, there's kind of a trend here where students are generally benefiting most from either the scheme that weights exams the lowest or the one that weights exams the highest. All right, so now I'm going to show how this can be implemented in Brightspace. So I will see how well this works. Screen sharing here, and hopefully nothing terrible shows up, no student grades or anything. So this is my shell for Meteorology 100 for this coming fall. So one thing that I did not do back in the 2025 to 26 academic year was actually implement this in Brightspace, but I'm now working on implementing it fully in Brightspace for the coming year, since I think that this will allow students to better keep track of their grades, and it is possible to do this. So the thing to focus on here, I think, if we go to the setup wizard, there are three types of grading systems available to us in the gradebook. One of them is weighted, the other is points-based, and then this last one is formula grading. So if I go to manage grades here, you'll see that I've just started putting in individual assignments or individual like days for attendance and participation, individual homework assignments. I've made these 10 points each, but you could do it any way you wanted. Midterm exams and then the final exam. So these are the actual grades for the actual assignments. Those will go in these four categories. So we have the ability to add both items and categories. So all four of these things are categories, and then the items are the individual entries within each category. But then I have two extra categories that I created here. One of them is calculated grades by category, and the other one is overall grades by formula. So for all I know, it's possible to do this a bit more efficiently. I was not able to figure out a way to do it, but if you are a Brightspace expert and happen to know a better way of doing this, please reach out to me or let me know in the chat, or let everyone know in the chat. So in any case, for this item, midterm exams overall, for instance, I have a formula for what goes into that. So the way that I generally do this is that in this first category, calculated grades by category, I use a formula to calculate what is their overall final exam, midterm exam, homework, and in-class assignments, and attendance and participation grades. So these are the things that will be going into the formula with the percentages later on. I was not able to figure out a way to take the numbers kind of that were already being calculated for these categories and put them into the formula at the very end. But the formulas at the very end are the ones down here. All right, so if we go into this, you'll see that there's a formula here. So the way to do this is that you click the edit using the formula editor, and there are a bunch of different items on here that you can do to create a formula. So if I wanted to, maybe if I just kind of delete all of this just to try to reconstruct it from scratch. So what I wanted to do here is take the average of the top two out of the three midterm exams. So I will take the sum, and then I'll press start. So I want to take the sum of three things, and then I'll subtract the lowest of those three items from that sum. So I will put in midterm exam 1, points received. Actually, no, I'll do as percent. That's probably, then I can put in the next term. So the next term in this sum should be midterm 2. And then the next term in that sum should be midterm 3. And then I press the end button. So that does that. Now I want to subtract. There we go. The lowest of those three midterm exam scores. So that would be minimum of, oops, I pressed that button twice somehow. Let's try this again. Minimum of midterm 1%, next term, midterm 2%, next term, midterm 3%, insert, and then I want to end that list of items. So now what I've done is I've taken basically the sum of the top two scores here. It's the sum of all three of them minus the lowest one. And then all I'm going to do is take the average of the two, which I can just do by dividing what we started off with here, the whole thing, dividing the whole thing by 2. Because I have 2 exam scores remaining that are summed, and I just divide by 2 to get their average. I think everyone on here is a math professor, so you don't need me to explain that probably. Okay, and then I can do save and close. Hopefully that works. And then what I did, so you can do that for all of the different categories. It ends up being a little bit tricky with some of these. So in one instance for the homeworks, I ended up doing it as the sum of all points received divided by the sum of all points that could have been earned. And all of those things can be done with the formulas in here as well. So I had been using the percent option, but you can use max points or points received. And then finally, for calculated grades, overall grades by formula, that's where we actually put in the formulas. So this is another whole category, and I'm able to show the actual, show students what their score is according to each of the formulas. So this is 10% attendance and participation, 40% homework assignments, 25% midterms, and 25% final exam. And so that's how it goes in. I found that this interface is a little bit clunky. You have to press the backspace button instead of the backspace button on your keyboard. Some things you can type, some things you cannot type. Again, if you want to do the sum of a bunch of things, you have to kind of add them, put them in as different terms instead of like item 1 through the last item or something like that. That wasn't an option the way it would be in Excel. But anyway, so I put in all 4 of these formulas into Brightspace, and I actually have only 3 in here for reasons that I'll discuss after we restart the recording. And then for final calculated grade, that's where I insert the formula for taking the maximum of all 3 formula values. So take the max of formula 1%, formula 2%, and formula 3%. And I did test this out with a student. You do have to put in, if you're dealing with percentages, you'd want the maximum points to be 100. All right, so that is it with the Brightspace implementation. Were there any questions about how this was implemented in Brightspace? If you want to, feel free to raise your hand, or I can even open up a short answer question in iClicker as well. In general, I'm just going to leave this iClicker question open in case people have comments that they want to share more anonymously with me. You can put those into this active short answer question right now in iClicker. But I think that's it for before we stop recording, though, I want to restart my sharing and just show the QR code one more time. So again, to request video access later on, it's tinyurl.com/video MGS 2026.